In the heart of central China, about 20 miles east of today's Xi'an in Shanxi province, lies an archaeological site unlike anything else on Earth, the enormous mausoleum of the first Qin emperor. This vast underground city wasn't built over generations. It was the vision of a single ruler determined to carry his empire into eternity. Construction began in 246 BC, the same year a 13-year-old prince named Yingzheng inherited the throne of the Qin kingdom. Over the next few decades, he achieved what no ruler before him could. He defeated 6 rival kingdoms, united the land under one banner, and proclaimed himself Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of China. But while he was creating an empire above ground, an even greater project was taking shape beneath it. By the time Qin Shi Huang died in 210 BC, an estimated 700,000 workers had spent decades building a massive burial complex designed to accompany him into the afterlife. Stretching across nearly 22 square miles, the site is one of the largest funerary monuments ever constructed. At its center stands a towering earthen mound, rising roughly 115 feet above the surrounding plain, concealing the emperor's still unopened tomb. The world became aware of this hidden empire in 1974, when local farmers accidentally uncovered the famous Terracotta Army while digging a well. More than 8,000 life-sized soldiers, complete with horses and chariots, were eventually discovered. Yet those remarkable statues are only a small part of a far larger necropolis containing over 600 separate burial pits spread across the landscape. Despite decades of research, the emperor's central burial chamber has never been entered. Chinese archaeologists have repeatedly explained that they will not risk opening it until modern conservation technology can guarantee that every artifact inside can be preserved without damage. Protecting the site has always taken priority over satisfying curiosity. While the unopened tomb attracted most of the public's attention, another breakthrough quietly unfolded in 2018 and 2019. Albert Lin, a National Geographic explorer and geophysicist known for using advanced remote sensing technology, received permission to survey the outer areas of the mausoleum without disturbing the ground. His team deployed LiDAR, ground-penetrating radar, and high-resolution drone mapping, the same methods previously used to reveal hidden Maya cities beneath dense jungles and locate long-lost Mongol sites across Central Asia. What these instruments uncovered around the western section of the mausoleum was extraordinary. Beneath the surface were vast underground structures and unexplored features already mentioned in academic research, but rarely presented to the public in their full scale. The findings hinted that the Terracotta Army may represent only a tiny portion of an even larger underground complex waiting to be understood. For decades, the Terracotta Army has been the face of Qin Shi Huang's legacy. But the landscape surrounding it tells a much bigger story, one that historians are only beginning to piece together. To understand why these discoveries matter, we first need to understand the man who ordered the entire complex into existence. Qin Shi Huang was more than a powerful king. He fundamentally changed Chinese history. Before his rise, there was no unified China. Instead, the region was divided among 7 rival states, Qin, Han, Zhao, Wei, Chu, Yan, and Qi, locked in relentless warfare for more than 2 centuries. This turbulent age, remembered as the Warring States period, was one of the most violent and transformative chapters in ancient history. From that chaos emerged a ruler whose ambition reshaped an entire civilization, and whose greatest secrets may still remain buried beneath the earth. The state of Qin was not the largest of these kingdoms. It was not the most cultured. It occupied the western margins of the Chinese cultural sphere in territory that the other kingdoms considered semi-barbarous. But Qin had advantages. Music. Its location in the Wei River Valley gave it natural defensive barriers. Music. Its adoption of legalism, a political philosophy that emphasized strict laws, centralized administration, and the ruthless subordination of individual interests to music state power gave it an organizational efficiency that the other kingdoms could not match. Its military reforms, music, including the systematic promotion of soldiers based on merit rather than birth, created an army that fought with a discipline and ferocity that shocked its enemies. Yingzheng inherited the throne of Qin in 246 BC at the age of 13. By 221 BC, when he was 38 years old, he had conquered every rival kingdom and unified the warring territories under a single administration for the first time in history. He declared himself Qin Shi Huang, first emperor, and announced that his dynasty would rule for 10,000 generations. It lasted 15 years, but in those 15 years, music, Qin Shi Huang, transformed China in ways that persisted for millennia. He standardized the writing system, creating a unified script that allowed communication across regional dialects. He standardized weights, measures, and currency. He standardized axle widths so that carts could travel the same roads throughout the empire. He connected existing northern fortifications into a unified defensive wall, the earliest version of what would eventually become the Great Wall. He also burned books. In 213 BC, on the advice of his legalist chancellor Li Si, Qin Shi Huang ordered the destruction of historical and philosophical texts that did not originate from Qin. The Confucian classics, music, the records of the rival kingdoms, the accumulated wisdom of centuries, all were consigned to flames in an attempt to erase the memory of what had existed before unification. The following year, according to the historian Sima Qian, the emperor ordered approximately 460 scholars buried alive for criticizing his rule. The first emperor was not a gentleman, and the burial complex he constructed was not a gentle place. Construction began the year Yingzheng took the throne when he was 13 years old, 36 years before his death. The complex was designed from the beginning to be the largest tomb, music, ever built. Sima Qian, writing approximately a century after the emperor's death, music in his monumental work, the Shiji, the records of the grand historian, provided the most detailed surviving description of what the tomb was designed to contain. According to Sima Qian, the tomb chamber was constructed to represent the entire known world. The ceiling was decorated with celestial bodies, the sun, the moon, the stars in their proper positions. The floor was a map of the empire with the 100 rivers of China and the 4 seas represented by channels of flowing mercury. Mechanisms were installed to keep the mercury rivers in perpetual motion. Crossbow traps were set to kill anyone who entered. The craftsmen who built the tomb were sealed inside to prevent them from revealing its secrets. The childless concubines of the emperor were buried alive to accompany him into the afterlife. The account was written 100 years after the fact. It was based on court records, oral traditions, and Sima Qian's own educated speculation. For most of the past 2,000 years, scholars debated whether the description was literally accurate or an elaborate literary embellishment. Then, the soil testing began. In the 1980s, Chinese archaeologists conducted systematic analysis of soil samples taken from the central tomb mound. The results were striking. Music, mercury concentrations in the soil above the burial chamber were anomalously high, far higher than background levels in the surrounding plain. The distribution pattern suggested a large quantity of mercury beneath the surface, concentrated in a way that was consistent with Sima Qian's description of mercury rivers representing the waterways of the empire. The finding was confirmed in 2003 and subsequent analyses. The mercury music is real. The rivers may be real. And if Sima Qian was accurate about the mercury, what else might he have been accurate about? The Terracotta Army was discovered by accident. On March 29, 1974, a group of farmers led by Yang Jifa were digging a well in Xi'an village in Lintong district, approximately 1 mile east of the central tomb mound. They struck fragments of terracotta. The initial finds were reported to local authorities. Archaeologists arrived. The excavation began. What they found was unprecedented. Music Pit 1, the largest of the Terracotta Army pits, contained approximately 6,000 life-size ceramic soldiers arranged in military formation. Infantry, archers, charioteers, officers, music an entire army frozen in terracotta facing east toward the territories that Qin Shi Huang had conquered. Music. Each soldier was individual. The faces were distinct, different noses, different eyes, different expressions. The hairstyles varied by rank and regional origin. The armor, weapons, and equipment were rendered in precise detail. The figures were originally painted in vivid colors, reds, music, greens, blues, purples, that began to oxidize and fade within hours of exposure to air. The color loss was a catastrophe. The terracotta figures that visitors see today are gray and brown, the bare ceramic after the paint has disappeared. The original army was a riot of color. Each soldier's uniform and armor painted in the pigments that identified his unit and rank. That color is gone because the technology to preserve it did not, music, exist in 1974. The lesson was absorbed by Chinese archaeology. Excavation destroys what it reveals. The decision was made early and consistently that the central tomb would not be opened until preservation technology could guarantee that nothing would be lost. The army, music, was only one pit. Pit 2, excavated beginning in 1976, music contained approximately 1,300 additional figures, cavalry units, kneeling archers, and music chariots with their horses and drivers. Pit 3, the smallest, music contained approximately 70 figures arranged in a configuration that archaeologists interpreted as a command unit. The generals and strategists, music, who would direct the army in the afterlife. But the 3 army pits were not the end. They were the beginning. Yuan Zhongyi, the longtime director of the Qin Terracotta Army Museum, who oversaw much of the foundational excavation, documented the broader discoveries as they accumulated. In 1980, excavators working west of the central mound discovered a pit containing music 2 bronze chariots, half-life-size replicas of the emperor's personal vehicles, rendered in bronze with extraordinary metallurgical sophistication. The chariots were functional at scale. The wheels turned. Music. The canopies were covered with bronze fabric cast to imitate silk. Gold and silver inlays decorated music the surfaces. The bronze chariots demonstrated that the Terracotta Army was not music, an isolated phenomenon. It was one component of a larger complex, a necropolis, designed to provide the emperor with everything he might music need in the afterlife. The discoveries continued. In 1998, music archaeologists excavated Pit K9801, the stone armor pit. Inside were hundreds of sets of finely crafted stone armor and helmets. The limestone pieces linked together with bronze wire music to create functional protective garments. The craftsmanship was extraordinary. The stone armor would never have been worn in battle. It was too heavy and too fragile. It was created specifically for the tomb. In 1999, Pit K9901 revealed something unexpected. Terracotta figures of acrobats, not soldiers, performers, figures in poses of physical display, contortionists, music, and strongmen frozen in terracotta for the emperor's eternal entertainment. In 2000, Pit K0006 produced terracotta figures of civilian officials, government administrators, music in their robes of office, the bureaucrats who would manage the imperial afterlife. In 2001, Pit K0007 revealed dozens of waterfowl music in bronze cranes, swans, and geese rendered in lifelike detail, positioned as if waiting music in a bronze river. Musicians were found nearby, terracotta figures holding instruments prepared to serenade the emperor with music for music eternity. Stable pits contained the remains of horses. Storage pits contained ceramic music vessels. Smaller features, scattered across the 22-square-mile complex, suggested functions that archaeologists are still working to music understand. By the early 2000s, Chinese archaeology had documented over 600 separate burial features within the broader necropolis. The Terracotta Army, the famous image that represents the Qin mausoleum in popular Snort's consciousness, is approximately 1% of the total complex. The rest has been mapped but not fully excavated, and the central tomb, beneath its 100-foot mound, remains sealed. Albert Lin is not a conventional archaeologist. He holds a doctorate in materials science and engineering from the University of California, San Diego. His specialty is applying remote sensing technologies to archaeological problems using instruments, music, that can see beneath surfaces without disturbing them. His methodology music was developed across multiple continents. In Mongolia, Lin led the Valley of the Khans project, a National Geographic-funded expedition that sought to locate the hidden tomb of Genghis Khan using satellite imagery, ground-penetrating radar, and crowdsourced image analysis. The tomb was never definitively located, but the project demonstrated the power of combining multiple sensing technologies to detect buried structures across vast landscapes. In Guatemala, Lin collaborated with the Pacunum LIDAR initiative, the airborne survey that in 2018 revealed over 60,000 previously undocumented Maya structures beneath the jungle canopy of the Petén region. The LIDAR survey transformed understanding of Maya civilization overnight, demonstrating that populations and urban development had been vastly larger than ground-based archaeology had recognized. The Guatemala findings made international headlines. They also established Lin's credentials as someone who could see what others could not. Music. In 2016, Lin lost his lower right leg in an all-terrain vehicle accident. He continued his fieldwork, adapting music, his methods, and his equipment to his changed circumstances. His National Geographic series, Lost Cities Revealed with Albert Lin, documented his ongoing expeditions to archaeological sites around the world. When Lin received music permission to bring his instruments to the Qin Mausoleum complex, he was operating at the boundary of what non-invasive technology could detect. The central tomb was off-limits. Even approaching the mound required careful negotiation with Chinese authorities who had spent music decades managing access to the site. But the perimeter was accessible, and the perimeter had never been systematically surveyed with the full suite of modern remote sensing technologies. Lin's team deployed LIDAR, which stands for Music Light Detection and Ranging, to create precise three-dimensional maps of the surface music terrain. LIDAR can detect subtle variations in elevation that are invisible to the eye, revealing the outlines of buried walls, filled-in pits, and other subsurface features. They deployed ground-penetrating music radar, spelled GPR, which sends electromagnetic pulses into the earth and records the reflections from buried structures. GPR can detect voids, music changes in soil density, and the outlines of walls and chambers beneath the surface. They flew aerial drones equipped with photogrammetric cameras, creating high-resolution composite music images of the entire survey area. And they integrated their findings with satellite imagery from Digital Globe and other commercial providers, allowing them to place their ground-based observations in a broader geographic context. Music. The results confirmed what Chinese archaeology had been documenting for decades, but presented it in a form that the broader public had never seen. The 600 burial pits that Yuan Zhongye and his successors had mapped were not random. They were arranged in a deliberate pattern, a necropolis organized according to principles that reflected the administrative structure of the Qin Empire itself. Music. The Terracotta Army occupied the eastern sector, facing outward toward the conquered territories. The acrobats, musicians, music, and entertainers were positioned to the south and west. The administrative officials were located in positions that corresponded to their functions in the imperial bureaucracy. The bronze waterfowl occupied a sector that appeared to represent a pleasure garden, a zone of recreation for the emperor's afterlife leisure. The pattern was not visible from the ground. It became visible from the air. The necropolis was a map, a three-dimensional representation of the world Qin Shi Huang had ruled, translated into tomb architecture and buried beneath the plain. Music. But the most significant findings came from the area closest to the central mound. The tomb mound itself rises approximately 76 meters above the surrounding plain, eroded from its original height over music 2 millennia, but still imposing against the flat agricultural landscape. Lin's instruments could music not penetrate the mound directly. The depth was too great, the soil too dense, the target too uncertain for the technologies he had available. But the surveys of the immediate perimeter revealed features that the broader public had never seen clearly presented. The mound was surrounded by walls, the remnants of the original tomb enclosure, partially excavated music by Chinese archaeology, but never fully mapped in 3 dimensions. Lin's LiDAR surveys revealed the complete outline of the enclosure system, including sections that remained buried and had never been excavated. The enclosure was double-walled. An inner wall surrounded the mound directly. An outer wall enclosed a broader ceremonial precinct. The walls were massive, music in some sections over 6 meters thick, and had been constructed with the same engineering precision that characterized the rest of the complex. Music. Between the walls, ground-penetrating radar surveys detected additional subsurface features, pits, structures, anomalies that suggested music chambers and corridors that had never been excavated. The pattern suggested that music, the immediate vicinity of the mound, the innermost ring of the necropolis, contained music burial features that were distinct from the Terracotta Army and its associated pits. What those features contained, Lin could not determine from non-invasive survey alone. But their existence confirmed what Chinese archaeology had long suspected. The central tomb was not an isolated chamber beneath music, a mound. It was the nucleus of a dense, complex, highly organized burial system that extended music outward in concentric rings. The army, a mile to the east, was the outermost ring. The innermost ring, the music features closest to the emperor's actual burial chamber, has never been excavated, and the chamber itself remains sealed. The Mercury findings are the elephant in the room. Multiple independent soil surveys have confirmed music that the ground above the central burial chamber contains mercury concentrations far above natural background levels. The distribution pattern is consistent, music, with a large quantity of liquid mercury beneath the surface. Sima Qian's account, written a century after the emperor's death, described rivers of mercury representing the waterways of China. The soil chemistry, music, confirms that mercury is present. The question is whether it is still liquid, still flowing in the channels that the original music builders constructed, or whether 2,000 years have allowed it to disperse, to solidify, to transform into something other than what Sima Qian music described. The answer is unknown, and the answer may remain unknown for decades. Chinese authorities have been consistent in their position. Music. The central tomb will not be excavated until technology exists to preserve whatever is inside. The 1974 lesson, the terracotta soldiers whose paint oxidized within hours of exposure, has been absorbed deeply. The officials responsible for the site have watched other archaeological excavations destroy what they revealed. Music. They have seen organic materials crumble to dust. They have seen pigments fade, metals corrode, textiles disintegrate. They have decided that the central tomb will not suffer the same fate. The decision is defensible. If the burial chamber contains what Sima Qian described, music, the celestial ceiling, the geographic floor, the rivers of mercury, the treasures of an empire, then opening it prematurely, music could destroy evidence that can never be recovered. If the chamber, music, contains the emperor's preserved remains, which is uncertain given that Chinese tradition often cremated the dead, music and the state of preservation after 2 millennia is unknowable. Then exposing those remains to air music could cause irreversible damage. The cautious approach protects what might be inside, but it also raises questions. Music proposals have been made to image the interior of the mound using non-invasive technologies more powerful than anything Lin deployed. Muon tomography, a technique, music that uses naturally occurring cosmic rays to image dense structures, has been successfully applied to the pyramids of Egypt, revealing previously unknown voids within the Great Music Pyramid of Giza. The same technique could theoretically be applied to the Qin tomb mound, producing an image of the interior chambers without opening a single seal. The proposals have been discussed. They have not been implemented. The reasons are complex. Chinese archaeology operates within an institutional framework that balances scientific interest, music, against cultural sensitivity, national pride, and political considerations that outsiders do not always fully understand. The Qin Mausoleum is not merely an archaeological site. It is a symbol of Chinese civilization, the burial complex of the man who created China as a unified political entity. Decisions about the site are made at the highest levels, and the highest levels have decided so far that the risks of investigation outweigh the benefits. Music Albert Lin's survey added to the body of non-invasive data that has accumulated over decades. It did not penetrate the central mystery, but it did demonstrate music in a form that the public could finally see, the scale of what remains unexcavated. The Terracotta Army is famous. Music. The 600 pits that surround it are not famous. The double-walled enclosure around the central mound is not famous. Music. The subsurface features detected by ground-penetrating radar, suggesting chambers and corridors that have never been opened. Music are not famous. Lin's work made them visible, translated them from the technical literature of Chinese archaeology into images and maps, music that international audiences could understand. The result was not a revelation of what is inside the tomb. It was a revelation of how much remains outside the tomb that has never been music excavated. The Qin Mausoleum is not a completed archaeological project. It is a project that has barely begun. The 3 pits of the Terracotta Army have been excavated. The bronze chariots, music, have been recovered. A handful of the 600 additional pits have been explored. The vast majority of the complex remains in the ground. Duan Qingbo, a Chinese archaeologist who has been a major figure in subsequent Qin Mausoleum research, has estimated that decades of additional work remain music before even the peripheral features of the complex are fully understood. The central tomb is not on any realistic timeline. It will remain sealed for the foreseeable future. What lies inside, whether Sima Qian's account is accurate in every detail, in some details, or in none, will remain unknown until technology advances to a point where excavation can proceed without destruction. That technology does not yet exist. The irony of Qin Shi Huang's burial is that the man who sought immortality may have achieved a version of it. The historical record suggests that the first emperor was obsessed with living forever. He sent expeditions across the sea in search of the elixir of life. He consulted alchemists who promised music medicines that would extend his days without end. Some historians believe Qin Shi Huang's life may have ended because of the very obsession that defined it. Determined to defeat death, he consumed so-called elixirs of immortality, many of which likely contained mercury. Ironically, the substance he trusted to extend his life may have poisoned him instead. He died at just 49 years old, but in a strange way, his wish for immortality was still fulfilled. More than 2,000 years later, his presence continues to dominate the landscape through the colossal tomb he left behind. Everything inside the mausoleum appears frozen in time. The Terracotta Army still stands exactly where it was placed. Bronze chariots remain ready for a journey that never came. Entertainers, officials, and guardians continue their silent watch beneath the earth. Ancient historian Sima Qian even described rivers of mercury flowing through the burial chamber to symbolize the rivers of Qin Shi Huang's empire. If his account was accurate, those hidden channels may still exist today, untouched since the tomb was sealed over 2 millennia ago. Deep beneath the great burial mound lies the emperor himself. No archaeologist has ever entered the central chamber, leaving one of history's greatest mysteries completely intact. For now, the secrets of the first emperor remain locked behind layers of earth, waiting for a future generation capable of exploring them without causing irreversible damage. That future may arrive through technology rather than excavation. Scientists are developing increasingly sophisticated methods, including muon tomography, next-generation ground-penetrating radar, and other imaging systems that may one day allow researchers to map every corner of the hidden chamber without disturbing a single artifact. Some of the most important tools that will solve this mystery may not even exist yet. Until that day comes, Qin Shi Huang rests inside the extraordinary afterlife he designed for himself. The nation he helped create continues to protect his tomb with remarkable caution. Modern China, built upon many of the administrative reforms introduced during his reign, has chosen preservation over curiosity, ensuring that the emperor's final resting place remains undisturbed. The Terracotta Army may be the world's most famous archaeological discovery, attracting millions of visitors to Xi'an every year, but it represents only a tiny fraction of the entire mausoleum. Beyond those thousands of clay warriors stretches a vast underground landscape of hundreds of burial pits, massive enclosure walls, ceremonial structures, and unexplored chambers that remain hidden beneath the soil. When Albert Lin surveyed the site using advanced remote sensing technology, his findings transformed how researchers viewed the complex. His scans exposed the enormous scale of what still lies underground, but they could not reveal the contents of the emperor's sealed tomb. That final chapter remains unwritten, and whether it will be opened in 10 years, 100 years, or even longer depends entirely on future technology and the decisions of Chinese authorities. For now, speculation continues to surround the burial chamber. Could the legendary Mercury rivers still be intact? Might a ceiling decorated with stars still shine in darkness? Were the ancient stories of hidden crossbow traps based on real defensive mechanisms? No one knows. Even the craftsmen who built the tomb left behind no surviving account describing what they witnessed before the chamber disappeared forever beneath the earth. The emperor once dreamed that his dynasty would endure for 10,000 generations. Although his empire eventually fell, the tomb built to preserve his legacy has survived far longer than anyone could have imagined. Hidden beneath the mound, he remains beyond the reach of history, protected by the very descendants of the civilization he helped shape. Today, the Qin Mausoleum holds two remarkable distinctions. It is considered the largest imperial tomb ever constructed, and also the largest unopened archaeological tomb anywhere in the world. Lin's surveys revealed the incredible world surrounding it, but the greatest mystery, the chamber at its center, remains completely sealed. The Terracotta Army continues its silent vigil while the massive mound rises above the plains, concealing secrets that have rested in darkness for more than 2,000 years. Whether those secrets will one day be uncovered through careful excavation, advanced scanning technology, or simply revealed by the slow passage of time is impossible to predict. What is certain is that the mystery remains alive. Each new survey expands our understanding of the enormous 22-square-mile necropolis, proving that archaeologists have explored only a small portion of what Qin Shi Huang left behind. The warriors were never the whole story. They were only the beginning. The real story still lies beneath the earth. As technology continues to improve and researchers gather more data year after year, the hidden chamber moves one step closer to being understood. Somewhere within the archives of Xi'an's archaeological institutions, countless scans and measurements are quietly accumulating, waiting for the moment when science, and perhaps history itself, is finally ready to reveal what has remained hidden beneath the first emperor's tomb for over 2,000 years.